The Galactic Council chamber was a vast, circular hall, its ceiling a swirling canvas of distant galaxies projected in real time. Delegates from 100 species occupied the tiered seating, their murmurs blending into an eerie symphony of clicks, hisses, and guttural growls. At the center of the room, standing alone on the speaker's platform, was Ambassador Riley, humanity's representative. His posture was rigid but not tense, his expression carefully schooled into neutrality. He had been here before. He knew what was coming. A six-limbed being with crystalline skin and eyes like molten gold stood to address the assembly. Chancellor HFY of the Zorthrak, the dominant species among the council, was an imposing figure, his deep voice carrying an edge of amused disdain. "We have reviewed your request for admission to the Galactic Alliance," Ambassador Riley, HFY announced, his mandibles clicking with something that might have been laughter. "As per protocol, we have evaluated your world's technological advancements, your biological assets, and, most amusingly, your so-called apex predators." A wave of chuckles rippled through the assembly. The insectoid representative from the Krell Dominion chittered. "Indeed, we found your so-called lions and bears lacking." From the aquatic delegation, a translucent being with undulating tendrils bubbled, its translation device converting the sound into speech. "Your sharks are primitive brutes. Fast, yes, but mindless in their aggression. No strategy, no cunning. Unimpressive." Riley exhaled slowly through his nose, his fingers flexing at his sides. He had sat through this performance before, the ritual humiliation of an inferior species seeking entry. He had prepared for it. HFY's mandibles twitched, his species equivalent of a smirk. "Consider our own apex creatures, the Vacnor Zorthrak Prime, a beast that hunts in coordinated packs, capable of crushing steel with its jaws. The Vreenak serpent of Krell Dominion. Its neurotoxin can fell an entire colony in minutes. Even the lesser species among us boast predators far superior to yours. Tell me, Ambassador, do you truly believe that your Earth-born creatures warrant fear? That your planet deserves a seat among us?" Riley took his time before responding, letting the silence stretch. Then he smiled. It wasn't the placating, diplomatic expression they expected. It was something else. "I understand why you're laughing," he said, his voice even. "It's easy to compare Earth's predators to yours and find them lacking. Strength, speed, venom, pack coordination. You have us beat on all fronts." HFY tilted his head slightly. The room was quiet now, waiting. "But you made one mistake," Riley continued. "You assumed we measure threat the same way you do." The insectoid Krell clicked their mandibles, their equivalent of a scoff. "And how do humans measure threat?" Riley's smile widened. "By something far more dangerous than mere strength." A holographic projection flickered to life beside him. It displayed a creature no larger than a small dog, its stocky body covered in thick fur, its small black eyes gleaming with a glint of something unsettling. "This," Riley said, "is Malivra capensis, the honey badger." For a long moment, there was silence. Then the laughter came again, but it was different now, more confused and mocking. Even HFY hesitated before speaking. "This is a joke," he said, his voice edged with irritation. "A creature of such insignificant size cannot possibly be relevant to this discussion." "You'd think so," Riley said smoothly. "And yet I assure you it is." The hologram shifted, playing recorded footage. It showed the honey badger facing a massive venomous snake. The alien delegates leaned forward as the badger darted forward, took a direct strike, then, seemingly unaffected, lunged at the snake's throat and tore it apart. It collapsed soon after, limp, as if the venom had finally taken effect. The chamber stirred with murmurs. Then, 2 minutes later, the badger twitched. Its breathing resumed. It rose, shook itself off, and continued eating the snake's remains. The murmurs grew louder. The projection shifted again. A pack of wild dogs surrounded the honey badger, circling, barking. Instead of retreating, the badger lunged at them, fearless despite being outnumbered. One by one, the dogs fell back, tails tucked, unwilling to risk the battle. The murmurs turned into something else, unease. Riley clasped his hands behind his back. You see, the honey badger is not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor even the smartest predator on Earth. And yet, nothing not venom, not injury, not superior numbers, deals it from a fight. It does not know fear. It does not stop. HFY's expression had shifted from amusement to something more guarded. And you present this as what? An analogy for your species. Riley's gaze met his without flinching. More than an analogy, Chancellor. A warning. Silence. The projection faded. You thought Earth's strength was in its lions, its sharks, its wolves, Riley continued. But you overlooked the creatures that survive at all costs, that endure no matter the odds. And if you think we don't take inspiration from them, you haven't studied humans closely enough. The insectoid Krell shifted uneasily. The aquatic delegate's tendrils flickered in agitation. Even HFY was silent, his crystalline fingers tapping against the armrest of his seat. Riley let the weight of the moment settle before he turned, stepping back toward his designated seat. Mock us if you like, he said over his shoulder, his tone still measured, still calm. Laugh at our so-called weakness. But if you truly believe we are unworthy of this council, I invite you to test that belief. And with that, he sat. The silence stretched long after. A tense stillness had settled over the Galactic Council chamber. Gone were the chuckles and dismissive scoffs. Instead, eyes, compound, multifaceted, glowing, or slit-pupiled, were locked on Ambassador Riley, scrutinizing him as if searching for some trick, some deception in his words. The honey badger's display had rattled them, but disbelief still lingered. Chancellor HFY's mandibles clicked in irritation as he leaned forward. A bold speech, Ambassador. But words alone do not shape reality. If this creature is as formidable as you claim, we will see for ourselves. Riley nodded once, as if he had expected nothing less. He gestured subtly, and a human attendant, dressed in the sleek black of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, tapped the control panel. A section of the chamber's floor shimmered and deactivated, revealing the combat testing arena below, a circular pit lined with reinforced alloy, its walls laced with energy barriers strong enough to contain the galaxy's most ferocious beasts. A ripple of anticipation spread through the gathered species. The Zorthrak leaned forward, their iridescent eyes narrowing. The insectoid Krell twitched their segmented limbs. The aquatic delegates watched with interest, their translucent bodies pulsing with bioluminescent flickers. A metallic gate groaned open, and a sleek, quadrupedal creature slinked into the arena. It was a Zektar, a lesser predator from a mid-tier warworld. Its scaled hide shimmered like liquid mercury, its 6 yellow eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. A frill of razor-sharp spines flared along its neck as it took in its surroundings, then fixed its gaze on the opposite gate. A second gate hissed open, and a small, unassuming figure padded into the arena. It was the size of a human toddler, its fur thick and coarse, its black eyes gleaming under the artificial lights. The honey badger sniffed the air, utterly unperturbed by the alien beast standing across from it. For a beat, there was silence. Then laughter, short and disbelieving. The Krell representative's mandibles clicked in amusement. "This is your fearsome warrior," it hissed. "A soft-skinned scavenger?" The Zektar didn't hesitate. It lunged forward, its movement swift and lethal, closing the distance in seconds. Its maw opened wide, revealing needle-like teeth capable of injecting paralyzing venom. The honey badger didn't flinch. It met the Zektar head-on, barreling into it with reckless aggression. Jaws latched onto scaly flesh, claws dug deep, and in an instant, what had been a straightforward kill became a writhing, hissing mess of fur and muscle. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates leaned forward, their disbelief turning into morbid fascination. The Zektar twisted violently, its spine frills slashing at its attacker, venomous barbs piercing the badger's flank. Yet impossibly, the badger held on. Blood leaked from the wound, but it didn't release its grip. Instead, it clamped down harder, teeth whirring at the Zektar's exposed throat. The alien predator shrieked. It battered the badger against the ground, slamming it repeatedly into the reinforced floor with enough force to shatter bone. Any other creature would have released. Any other creature would have retreated. The honey badger did neither. With a final, savage shake, it tore free a chunk of the Zektar's throat. The alien predator spasmed once, then collapsed, twitching weakly as its life bled out onto the floor. Silence. The honey badger, panting, glanced around. Then, with casual indifference, it began to eat. Someone in the chamber cursed in their native tongue. The aquatic delegate's tendrils flickered wildly. Even HFY seemed momentarily speechless. Riley folded his arms. "Do I have your attention now?" HFY's mandibles clicked rapidly, an unfamiliar expression crossing his crystalline features, something between intrigue and unease. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he raised one clawed hand. Impressive, he admitted, but hardly conclusive. The Zektar was a lesser predator, nothing close to a true apex killer. If this honey badger is as relentless as you claim, then it should have no issue with something more worthy. A murmur ran through the chamber. Riley met HFY's gaze, his expression unreadable. Then, he inclined his head slightly. "As you wish." A different set of gates rumbled open, and a new creature stalked into the arena. The moment it appeared, a hush fell over the chamber. It was massive, at least 3 times the size of the honey badger. Its thick, plated hide gleamed with natural armor, its elongated skull sporting twin rows of serrated teeth. Bioengineered musculature coiled beneath its skin, honed by generations of genetic refinement on the Zorthrak homeworld. This was no common beast. This was a warborn. It exhaled sharply, tasting the air. Then, without warning, it charged. The impact was immediate, brutal. The honey badger was sent tumbling across the floor, crashing against the arena's barrier. A normal animal would have been broken. A normal animal would have stayed down. The honey badger rolled back onto its feet. Blood leaked from its side where claws had raked deep, but its posture was unchanged. It didn't hesitate. It didn't weigh its options. It attacked. It darted low, under the warborn's swing, and latched onto its forelimb, sinking its teeth deep. The warborn howled, its thick hide denting under the pressure. It shook violently, trying to dislodge its attacker, but the badger held on. The warborn slammed the badger into the floor. Again. Bones cracked, blood spattered, but still, the badger did not let go. Then, impossibly, it climbed, its claws raking across the warborn's shoulder, scrambling upward, biting, tearing. It went for the eyes, the throat, anywhere it could reach. The warborn staggered, screaming, trying to dislodge the impossibly small terror that had become its undoing. And then, just like that, it was over. The warborn collapsed, bloody, broken, unmoving. The honey badger, soaked in viscera, stood over the corpse. It swayed slightly, its breath ragged. Then, with a slow, almost lazy movement, it licked its wounds. Riley turned back to the silent assembly. He could see it now. The way they looked at the creature, the way their eyes flicked between the badger and the human standing beside it. Realization had settled in. It had survived. It had endured. And if this was just an animal, what did that say about the species that revered it? Riley smiled. "Now," he said quietly, "do you understand?" The chamber remained silent. Not the uneasy murmurs of before, nor the stiff, diplomatic quiet of prior deliberations. This was something different, a silence thick with realization, heavy with an emotion that few in the council had ever felt in relation to humanity. HFY's crystalline fingers tapped against the armrest of his seat, slow and deliberate. His golden eyes flicked from the mutilated corpse of the warborn to the honey badger, which now sat licking its bloodied paws with an air of complete indifference. A creature that should not have won. A creature that had no right to win. And yet it had. A sharp, hissing exhale broke the quiet. The Krell representative leaned forward, its mandibles clicking rapidly. "It is injured," it observed. "It took damage." Riley turned his head slightly. "Yes." The aquatic delegate's tendrils flickered in a pattern of deep contemplation. "It is weaker now." "Yes." HFY Nock's voice was softer than before, measured. "And yet it does not retreat." Riley met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "No." A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. For all their laughter earlier, for all their certainty in human frailty, they were now faced with an undeniable truth. This was not an animal acting on simple instinct. This was something else, something that refused to accept reality as it was dictated to it. Riley stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "You misunderstand humanity," he said, his voice steady. "You compare us to the predators of your own worlds, creatures of strength, speed, and cunning. But humans do not win because we are stronger. We do not win because we are faster or larger or deadlier." He gestured toward the honey badger. "We win because we refuse to lose." HFY Nock's mandibles twitched. "Refusal does not change reality." "No," Riley agreed, "but it breaks reality's expectations." He let the words sink in before continuing. "You see a wounded creature and assume it is vulnerable. You see its injuries and think it should stop. But you fail to recognize that pain is irrelevant to a creature that has already decided it will not quit. That is the difference between us and the predators you admire. They fight until they sense they can no longer win." His voice lowered. "We fight even after that point." HFY Nock's fingers curled slightly. For the first time, a flicker of true concern crossed his features. Riley took another step forward. "Your species evolved to dominate because of superior physicality, superior predation. You rose to power by being stronger than what opposed you." His eyes swept across the gathered aliens. "We rose to power despite never being the strongest, or the fastest, or the most naturally suited to war." The aquatic delegate rippled with thought. "Then how?" Riley exhaled slowly. "Because when something stands against us, we do not ask whether we can overcome it. We do not calculate the odds and choose whether to fight. We decide, before the battle has even begun, that we will win, and then we make it happen." A shifting unease spread through the chamber. It was one thing to dismiss humanity when they were a young, seemingly inconsequential species. It was another to face the reality of what they were, what they had always been. Riley gestured to the pit below. That animal should be dead. It was smaller, weaker, outmatched in every way. And yet, here it stands, bloody but alive, because it refused to acknowledge that it had already lost. He turned back to the assembly. "Do you understand now?" The Krell delegate's mandibles twitched in uncertainty. "You are telling us that this is how all humans think." Riley smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No," he let the pause stretch just long enough for tension to settle. "I'm telling you that this is how we are trained to think." The weight of the words settled on the chamber like a physical force. HFY Nock's fingers drummed against the armrest. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quieter than before. "You have made your point." Riley dipped his head. "Have I?" For a long moment, the Chancellor simply studied him. Then, without looking away, he gestured toward the arena. The honey badger, still licking its wounds, flicked an ear. A team of human handlers entered, their movements smooth and efficient as they retrieved the battered creature. It did not snarl, did not fight. It had done its job. It had proved its point, just like Riley had. HFY Nock exhaled, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "You have given us much to consider, Ambassador." Riley nodded once. "Then consider wisely." And with that, he turned and walked back to his seat. The council remained in session long after the honey badger had been carried from the chamber. The delegates had retreated into quiet deliberation, their voices hushed, their movements slower and more measured than before. The atmosphere had changed. Where once there had been condescension, there was now something else, something heavier. Riley sat motionless in his chair, hands clasped loosely together. He had seen this before, this moment of forced recalibration. The realization that a species they had dismissed as fragile, as lesser, was something else entirely. He could feel their unease, the way their gazes flickered toward him, then away. Chancellor HFY remained silent for a long time, staring at nothing, his golden eyes distant. When he finally spoke, it was not with the mocking tone of before. "We were wrong about you." The words were simple, but in them lay a profound shift. The murmurs in the chamber ceased. Attention snapped back to the Chancellor, then to Riley. Riley did not smile. "You were..." HFY's crystalline fingers tapped against the armrest. "We have encountered warlike species before. Aggressive conquerors, mindless berserkers, even those who fight with strategy, with caution, with precision. But you..." He studied Riley carefully. "You fight without the promise of victory. You fight knowing the pain you will endure. And you fight anyway." Riley's gaze was steady. "Yes." HFY inclined his head slightly. "I am beginning to understand why your kind has survived as long as it has." The Krell representative clicked its mandibles, speaking slowly, cautiously. "You do not simply endure, you adapt. You change the terms of engagement. You force the universe to recognize your will." The aquatic delegate's translucent form pulsed with bioluminescent thought. "Your species should not have been the dominant force of your planet. And yet, you are..." Riley exhaled through his nose. "We were never meant to be the strongest. But strength is not what defines survival." HFY studied him for a long moment, then exhaled. "I once believed your kind to be amusing, a primitive species clawing its way toward relevance." His mandibles clicked in quiet contemplation. "Now, I see that you are always dangerous. Not because of your weapons, not because of your technology." He glanced toward the empty pit where the honey badger had stood. "But because of what you are." The weight of the admission settled over the chamber. It was not submission, not defeat. It was something deeper, an acknowledgement, a shift in perspective. HFY turned to the gathered representatives. "The question before us remains. Shall humanity be granted a seat within this council?" A murmur passed through the delegates. Where before there had been scorn, now there was measured discussion. Riley could see the change in posture, the way they regarded him not as an anomaly, but as something deserving of consideration. The Krell delegate clicked its mandibles. "We have underestimated them once. I will not make that mistake again." The aquatic delegate's tendrils flickered. "They have earned a place here." One by one, voices rose in agreement. Some were reluctant, some cautious, but the tide had turned. HFY's gaze remained on Riley. "Your species is reckless, stubborn beyond reason. And now I understand that this is why you endure." He leaned forward. "Do not make me regret this, Ambassador." Riley met his gaze evenly. "I wouldn't dream of it." The Chancellor's crystalline fingers tapped once against the armrest. A final gesture, a final decision. Then welcome to the Galactic Council, humanity. Riley did not smile. He only nodded, knowing that the real battle had just begun.